Hello Europa Universalis players, my name's Riemann and today I want to show you the mighty nation of Milan. This country can make for some very interesting games for a number of reasons. Although this tiny duchy starts with only 4 provinces, you'll find that it can consistently punch far above its weight. It's at the center of geopolitical struggles between many great powers, giving it outsized influence. Diplomacy is tight and your conquest must be careful, but if you're successful, you'll quickly find yourself as one of the foremost forces in Europe. With easy access to decisions, events, and conquerable territories, Milan has an unparalleled diversity of options it can choose from to expand. It also has a little trick up its sleeve, the Ambrosian Republic. Given some recent changes in the game, this little republic has a lot more power than may be apparent at first glance. So here's why I think you should check out Milan in Europa Universalis 4. Starting the game in 1444, Milan's position in northern Italy means it has lots of opportunities, but also lots of enemies. Domestically, the country is small but prosperous. It houses 85 development in just 4 provinces. The capital in particular stands out for being particularly rich. Early on, you'll get 2 events that will up the development by 3, and with a total development of 33, it becomes the highest development province in all of Europe, surpassing the likes of Rome, Vienna, London, and even Paris. On the diplomatic front, the most important factor at the start is that you begin in the Holy Roman Empire. The Shadow Kingdom has not entirely come to pass quite yet. This protects you from major threats like France, Aragon, and Hungary, but it comes at a cost. You'll take more aggressive expansion, meaning your early conquest will have to be measured and methodical. But when you do take over that territory, you'll find that northern Italy is the richest area in the game, bar none, meaning you'll accrue power unexpectedly fast. So how powerful is Milan? Well, to start off, they have some pretty exceptional ideas, being one of the few nations to have both idea and tech cost reductions. They start out with infantry combat ability, allowing them to trounce equal strength foes of the other Italian city-states with ease. Next, they get merc maintenance reduction, creating an interesting combo with admin, which can serve as part military ideas, along with their normal core cost reduction utility. Normally, I'd suggest going for quantity quite early, but with the cost reduction and strong economy that Milan gets, mercenary spam is completely viable. They round out their ideas with some manpower, prestige, trade power, dev cost, and stab cost reductions. All of them are nice to have, and none of them are really dead wood, meaning Milan is a straight-up powerhouse in its own merits. But this isn't what makes them interesting. No, what makes Milan special is their government type. When the ruler dies, they get an event allowing the establishment of the Ambrosian Republic. This has the power of a mid-game government, but you get it in the 15th century, so I highly suggest you take it. There's been a lot of controversy on republics recently as to whether they're still viable relative to monarchies. It's true, the disinheriting option on monarchies has made them much more powerful, with the ability to effectively spend prestige to get monarch skills. However, republics also got a buff that not many people are talking about, the strengthened government option. This allows you to spend 100 military points to get 3 Republican tradition if you have the Rights of Man expansion. This cost might seem like a lot, but it's actually one of the cheapest and most convenient ways to increase Republican tradition in the game. The main purpose of re-electing rulers is to increase their skills, because they gain 1 in every attribute every 4 years at the cost of 10 tradition. Prior to the strengthened government feature, there were some strategies that relied on stacking Republican tradition bonuses to produce consistently overpowered rulers. However, they were very difficult to pull off and often shoehorned you into specific paths. You'd have to take nations with tradition bonuses in their ideas, which was a problem because most of the rest of their ideas were usually mediocre for everything except trade. Next, you'd have to take the 10 years Abolition Act policy, which was incredibly awkward to pull off because it required you to take Aristocratic, which you could only get if you were a monarchy, essentially forcing you to collapse to a kingdom, then reform as a republic via decision, which forced you to take Influence as well. But its biggest drawback was how wasteful it was, as sometimes you'd overflow with tradition if you got a succession of old guys who died quickly. Overall, the strategy could produce some funny results, but it was clunky, slow, and awkward, and was thus relegated to being an interesting oddity and not much else. But now, the strengthened government option has arrived to essentially fix all its problems. We now have an on-demand supply of Republican tradition for a great price that's available at the start of the game to any nation. You don't have to force yourself to take a nation with mediocre ideas, you're not locked into choosing 3 idea groups so you can take a policy, there's no collapsing to a monarchy and then reforming as a republic, and it's a lot easier not to waste tradition. The math looks like this. There's elections every 4 years that cost you 10 tradition, which is 2.5 per annum. You can't re-elect if your ruler dies, so those years will cost you no tradition. When you get a new ruler, they have an age somewhere between 30 and 60, but I shoot for rulers who could be in office for a long time, so I discard any rulers that spawn older than 50 in the first re-election. Doing this, I average a cost of about 2.0 tradition per year. Next, you have a base tradition gain of 1 per year. You also get tradition from power projection for some reason. I usually have no problems keeping this above 75 for most of the game, but we'll assume you can average about 50, which nets you 0.1 a year. After this, there's religion. You can go Protestant or Coptic, getting you 0.1 or 0.2 respectively. Protestant is usually easier to get, but Coptic is objectively better, so try to snag it if you can. After this, there are 2 generic events called Grant Export Licenses and The Trial, both of which give you 5 tradition on the cheap. From a cross-selection of my games, I've gotten them about every 15 years or so, adding an average of 0.33. The strengthened government's job is to close the remaining deficit, and stabilize your tradition to a resting point of 88 to 95, giving you the bonuses from nearly full tradition, but keeping some breathing room for events or a string of old rulers. But we're not done yet, because you actually gain 50 random points from every re-election. This means your total point cost approximately breaks even or is even slightly positive over a long period of time, depending on religion and power projection. So what are the benefits of running a republic this way? The obvious answer is monarch points. I did some calculations and discovered my average was this when I accounted for the length of reign and changing skills each election cycle. This is an average total skill of about 12.75. Many people think disinheriting makes monarchies really good, and they're right, but republics are still a huge step above them in terms of raw point generation. For example, say you disinherit on average once per heir, effectively giving you 2 rules to get an heir with good stats. If we assume you somehow have clairvoyance to always select the better of the 2 options, the math comes out to about 3.9 per skill, instead of the 3 you would normally. This is still more than a full point behind republics, and while there's obviously going to be some variation given different risk tolerances, from my personal experience, it's usually a bit lower than this, especially if you average it over the entire game. To represent this graphically, here's where monarchies used to be, here's where they typically end up due to disinheriting, and here's where republics are, averaging in the top 15% of the distribution. Republics also get the benefit of achieving this without burning through prestige and without ever increasing their chances to falling victim to a regency. They also do it with exceptional consistency, which can count for a lot in this game. But one of the best things about republics is the distribution of the points. Your godlike 666 will eventually die, temporarily leaving you with someone who has a sum total of skills being 6. While this is less than the average monarch, it's made significantly better by the fact that you can choose what skill your ruler has 4 in. Typically, there's one type of point you need far more than others, either because you're coring, annexing a vassal, or filling out an idea group. This effectively gives you a second national focus, an ability I would have killed for many times in my games when I had a glut of military points but desperately needed admin for coring. There are other benefits to being a republic, of course. There's cultural sufferance for non-accepted cultures, giving you slightly more taxes and manpower, and less unrest, which can be a significant boon to large multi-ethnic empires. Republics also lose no stability on ruler death. You'll also never have to worry about an heir with low legitimacy, as high tradition is built into the strategy as a core element. The reason I chose Milan to show this strategy off is to give an example of how you can be a republic with constant re-elections without being forced into a trade-oriented country. The Ambrosian Republic gives extra morale at a time when morale is critical, allowing you to be a military juggernaut in the 15th century. After you've conquered northern Italy, the game is wide open to you to do basically anything you want. In fact, I'd say your position gives you more options than any other place in the game. Trading is certainly an option if you want it to be, as Italy is home to not 1 but 2 endnodes that serendipitously happen to come from opposite directions. Focusing on the Genoa node can give you access to opportunities in the New World and Africa, while the Venice node allows easy pickings in the Eastern Mediterranean, India, and Indonesia. Next, if you want to stay in the HRE and play with their mechanics, you can do this too. The Shadow Kingdom event gives you the option, not the obligation, to leave the Empire. You will get a triggered modifier if you decide to stay in, but this can be removed by becoming Emperor or changing your culture to anything but Italian. As for expansion, you have lots of possibilities. You could try your hand at colonization, you could make your way into Europe to establish continental hegemony, or you could go crusading to reclaim lands for the glory of Christendom. As for what style of game you want, you could stay as Milan with their ideas that reduce point costs and just stick to the peninsula for a more relaxed game. On the other hand, if you want a more traditional blobbing style game, you should think about forming Italy for their slightly better military ideas and of course the core cost reduction, which is great for potentially reforming the Roman Empire. I had a lot of fun playing as Milan. You start small, but once you get going, you pack as much of a punch as France or the Ottomans. Using the Ambrosian Republic, I was practically drowning in monarch points for the vast majority of the game. To give you a sense of this, I capped out on mercantilism in the early 1600s because I just had so many points to work with. For some extra tips on this strategy, I've included some of my other findings in the description below. These were things I thought were interesting, but I couldn't fit into this video. I've also included a link to a few of my sources if you want to check them out as well. My name's Riemann, and until next time, thanks for watching.